Welcome back to Tales of the Dark. I've been driving trucks for almost 9 years now, and in that time, I've learned one thing that most people don't understand about the job. It's not the long hours that get to you. It's not the isolation either. It's the nights. When the road feels like it's watching you back. This happened about 2 years ago when I was running a late-night haul through rural Pennsylvania. It wasn't a route I usually took, but dispatch had rerouted me last minute because of construction on the interstate. At first it didn't seem like a big deal, just another road, just another night. That's what I thought until I realized I wasn't alone out there. I had been driving for about 6 hours straight, heading down a long stretch of 2-lane highway that cut through miles of forest. No streetlights, no houses, just trees on both sides and the occasional road sign that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The kind of road where your headlights feel too small. It was around 2:15 in the morning when I first noticed him. There was a man walking along the shoulder of the road. That wasn't unusual by itself. You see weird stuff on the road all the time. Broken down cars, hitchhikers, people who clearly made bad decisions, but something about this guy felt off. He wasn't waving, he wasn't looking for help. He was just walking, slow, steady, head slightly down. As I got closer, my headlights lit him up just enough for me to see what he was wearing. Dark jacket, jeans, no bag, no flashlight. And the thing that stuck with me the most, he didn't look at me. Not even for a second. I passed him without slowing down, didn't think much of it, at least not right away, but maybe 5-10 minutes later something started bothering me. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it felt like that guy should have been gone from my mind by then. Instead, I kept thinking about him, the way he didn't react, didn't look up. Didn't even flinch when a full-sized truck roared past him in the middle of the night. It just didn't sit right. About 15 minutes later I saw him again. Same road, same position, walking along the shoulder. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter when I saw him. My first thought was simple: no way, there was no possible way he could have gotten ahead of me. I hadn't stopped. There were no side roads, no gas stations, no towns, nothing, just miles of empty highway. This time as I approached him, I slowed down slightly. Not enough to stop, just enough to get a better look. And that's when things got worse. Because this time he looked at me. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't aggressive, it was slow. His head turned just slightly, just enough for me to catch his face in the edge of my headlights. And I swear to God, his expression didn't change at all. No emotion, no curiosity, nothing, just staring, like he'd been expecting me. I didn't stop, didn't even consider it. I pressed the gas and kept going. But now my heart was beating faster because I knew what I had seen, and more importantly, I knew what wasn't possible. I kept driving, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a road I didn't see. Maybe it was a different guy who just looked similar. That's what I told myself. That's what I kept repeating in my head until I saw him again. This time he was standing, not walking. Standing right on the edge of the shoulder, facing the road, waiting, and this time he was smiling. I felt something drop in my stomach when I saw that. It wasn't a normal smile, it was too wide, too still. Like it had been placed on his face and left there. I didn't slow down this time, I didn't look at him, I just drove. And for the first time in years of driving, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: fear. After another 20 minutes I finally saw a rest stop sign. I needed to stop. Not because I was tired, but because I needed to get off that road. I needed light, people, anything. The rest stop was small, only about 6 or 7 trucks parked there. A couple of cars, dim lighting, but it was enough, it felt normal. I pulled in, parked and shut off the engine. For a few seconds I just sat there, listening, letting the silence settle, trying to calm down, and that's when I heard it. A knock, not loud. Not aggressive, just a soft tap. On the side of my trailer I froze. Another tap, this time closer, closer to the cab. I slowly turned my head toward the driver's side mirror, but I couldn't see anything, just darkness. Then another knock right below my door. My heart started pounding. Because there was no way, no possible way that guy could have gotten here before me. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe properly. I just sat there listening. Then I heard footsteps, slow, dragging slightly across the pavement, moving around my truck, from the driver's side to the back, then to the passenger side, and then they stopped, right outside my door. Silence, and then a voice, soft, low, right outside the cab. Hey, I felt my entire body go cold because I knew that voice. It was him, and the worst part, I had never heard him speak before. I didn't answer, not right away. My brain was trying to catch up with what was happening, but it felt like everything had slowed down, like time itself was stretching thin around me. That voice, it wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive. If anything, it sounded calm, too calm. Hey, it came again, softer this time, closer, like his face was right outside my window. I kept my eyes locked forward, staring at the windshield, even though all I could see was the dim glow of the rest stop lights reflecting back at me. Every instinct I had was telling me one thing: don't move, don't acknowledge him. There was a long pause. Long enough that I almost thought he had walked away. Then tap, 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 3 slow knocks against the glass. My chest tightened because that wasn't random, that was deliberate, measured, like he knew exactly how to get my attention without raising it. Open up, he said, same calm tone. No urgency, no anger, just expectation. I swallowed hard, finally forcing myself to glance toward the driver's side window, but I didn't turn my head fully, just enough to catch the edge of movement. There was a silhouette right there, standing inches from the glass. I couldn't make out his face clearly because of the angle and the lighting, but I could see the outline of his head, and I could see that he wasn't moving, not even slightly. That was the part that got to me. Most people shift their weight, they breathe differently. They move, this guy nothing. Come on, he said quietly, I just need help. The words sounded normal, reasonable even, but something underneath them felt wrong. Like the tone didn't match the situation, like he was reading from a script. I finally spoke. My voice came out tighter than I expected. I can call someone for you. There was a pause, then I don't need someone. Another pause, I need you. That hit me harder than anything else he'd said because it wasn't a request anymore. It was specific, targeted. I shook my head slightly, even though he probably couldn't see it clearly. I'm not opening the door. Silence, a long, heavy silence. Then slowly he leaned closer to the window. I could see more of his face now, not clearly, but enough. And what I saw made my stomach twist. He was still smiling, the same unnatural, stretched smile from the road, but up close it looked worse, too wide, too still, like his face wasn't built to hold that expression. You've seen me already, he said. His voice dropped just a little lower, almost amused. My grip tightened on the steering wheel because that confirmed it. This wasn't a coincidence, this wasn't random, he knew. I've been walking a long time, he continued. You didn't stop, I didn't respond, I couldn't. You passed me 3 times. My heart skipped because that wasn't right. 3 times, no, it was 2, unless you don't remember the first one, he added quietly. That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest, because suddenly I wasn't sure, had I? No. That didn't make sense. I would have remembered. I would have. Bang, something slammed against the back of the trailer. Hard, loud enough to shake the entire cab. I flinched violently, instinctively turning my head toward the sound. And in that split second, the man at my window disappeared. Gone. I whipped my head back toward the driver's side window. Nothing, no silhouette, no movement, just darkness. Another loud bang hit the trailer, then another. This time it wasn't just one spot, it was multiple points. Different sides, different angles. My breathing got shallow because there was no way. No possible way one person could move that fast. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and immediately dialed 911. As it rang, the banging stopped, completely, silence again. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone outside my truck, I whispered, my voice barely steady. I don't know how many. Before I could finish, tap, right on the glass again. I froze, slowly turning my eyes back toward the window. He was there, closer than before. And this time I could see his face clearly. Pale, too pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His eyes were wide open and completely focused on me, and that smile was even bigger now. You're talking to someone else, he said softly. I couldn't speak, I couldn't even process how he knew that. How about you hang up, he continued, tilting his head slightly, and we talk instead. My entire body felt cold, because that wasn't a guess, that was awareness. "I'm not hanging up," I said, forcing the words out. The dispatcher was still talking, asking questions, but I barely heard her. The man's smile twitched just slightly, for the first time. There was a change in his expression, not anger, not frustration, something worse, disappointment. "You're making this difficult," he said, and then he raised his hand and pressed it slowly against the glass. His fingers spread out wide, longer than they should have been, not unnaturally long, but enough to feel wrong. And then he did something I'll never forget. He tapped the glass again 3 times, the exact same pattern as before, like it meant something, like it was a signal. And then from somewhere behind the truck I heard footsteps, more than one. The footsteps weren't subtle anymore. They weren't trying to hide. They were fast, heavy, multiple, running. My chest tightened as the sound of them circled the truck, moving across the pavement, echoing through the quiet rest stop like something had just been unleashed. "Ma'am, I need you to stay on the line. What's happening?" The dispatcher's voice cut through the panic in my head. "There's more of them," I whispered. "There's more than one." The man outside my window didn't react to the noise, didn't even glance back. He just kept staring at me, smiling, like he already knew what was coming. Then suddenly he stepped back, just 1 step, but it was enough for his face to slip out of the dim light. And then he was gone, not walking away, not fading into darkness, just gone. I leaned slightly toward the window, trying to see where he went, but my view was limited. All I could see was the empty stretch of pavement beside my truck. But the footsteps, they didn't stop. They kept moving, faster now, circling from the back of the trailer to the passenger side, then toward the front. And then bang, something slammed against the passenger door, hard enough to rattle the entire cab. I flinched again, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Units are on the way," the dispatcher said. "Stay inside your vehicle. Do not open the door under any circumstances." "I'm not opening anything," I muttered. Another hit, this time against the side mirror. I turned my head just enough to see movement on the passenger side, a figure, tall, dark, standing too close, and then another shape moved behind it. My stomach dropped because now I could see it clearly. There wasn't just one. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. They moved differently than normal people, not coordinated but not chaotic either, like they were working together without speaking. One of them stepped closer to the front of the truck, briefly crossing into the beam of my headlights. For just a second I saw his face, and it made my blood run cold, because it wasn't the same man, different face, different build, but the same expression. That same wide, unmoving smile. "What the hell is this?" I whispered under my breath. The dispatcher asked something, but I didn't respond. I couldn't, because now one of them was at the back of the cab, and I heard it. The sound of fingers dragging slowly across the metal. From the back to the side to the door, a slow, scratching glide, like they were mapping it, learning it, and then everything stopped all at once. No footsteps, no movement, no sound, just silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong, too complete, too sudden. I held my breath, listening, waiting, then a voice, not from the window, not from outside the cab, from above me. "Open it." My eyes shot upward, the roof, something was on top of the truck. My entire body went rigid because I knew what that meant. There's only one way up there. They climbed it without me hearing. Another voice followed, slightly different, lower. "We know you're alone." I felt my stomach twist because that wasn't true. The dispatcher was still on the phone. Police were coming, but that's not what they meant. They meant no one was here to help me, not really. A sudden thud hit the roof, then another, footsteps walking across the top of the cab, slow, measured, and then they stopped right above my head. "Last chance," the first voice said. My hands were shaking now. I could barely keep my grip on the phone. "I'm not opening anything," I shouted. For the first time the voice changed, that calm, controlled tone gone, replaced with something sharper, colder. "You should have stopped." My chest tightened because that's what this was about, the road. "The walking man, you passed us," another voice added. "Us, not him, them. You were supposed to stop." A heavy slam hit the roof again, harder this time. The entire cab shook, and then something slid from the roof down toward the windshield. I looked up just in time to see a shadow move across the glass. A face pressed briefly against it, distorted by the angle, smiling. Then it disappeared. My breathing was out of control now, fast, shallow. "Where are the cops?" I snapped into the phone. "They're almost there," the dispatcher said. "Stay calm." "I'm not calm." Before she could respond, every single noise stopped. Instantly, dead silence, no footsteps, no voices, no movement, nothing. I didn't move, didn't even blink. Seconds passed, then more, and then in the distance I saw them, headlights. Flashing red and blue, coming fast. Relief hit me like a wave. "They're here," I whispered. As the police cars pulled into the rest stop, the silence broke, not with movement but with absence. Because when I finally looked around, they were gone, every single one of them. Like they had never been there. Gemini said the siren wails were the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. They cut through that suffocating Pennsylvania silence like a jagged blade, and for the first time in an hour, I felt like I could actually draw a full breath. I watched the strobing blue and red light reflect off the polished chrome of my hood. Flicker, flicker, flicker. A rhythmic reminder that the real world still existed. Tires crunched against the loose gravel of the lot as the cruisers swung in fast, their engines humming with a heavy, authoritative idle. I didn't move, I couldn't. I just sat there, my fingers still locked around the steering wheel so tight they felt like they'd fused to the leather. My eyes were glued to the windshield, scanning the periphery of the high beams, waiting for one of those things to dart across the pavement again. Nothing, no shadows, no tapping, no scratching, just the cold, indifferent lot. "Sir, stay in your vehicle," the dispatcher's voice crackled through my headset. She sounded calm, professional, the kind of voice that hasn't seen what's lurking in the tree line at 3:00 a.m. "Officers are approaching your position now, keep your hands visible." I nodded, a jerky mechanical movement even though she couldn't see me. I watched two officers step out of the lead car. Their boots hit the gravel with a heavy, solid thud crunch. It was a human sound. A real sound, not that soft, dragging slide I'd heard circling my trailer. They moved with a practiced, tactical caution, flashlights cutting long, aggressive arcs through the dark. One officer stayed back, scanning the undercarriage and the rear of the rig, while the other, a barrel-chested guy with a salt and pepper mustache, marched straight toward my door. He didn't tap, he knocked. A firm, heavy rap on the metal that made the cab shudder. "State Police." "You the one who called this in?" I exhaled, and it felt like a lead weight sliding off my chest. I fumbled for the window switch, cracking it just a few inches. The cold night air rushed in, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. Yeah, that was me," I croaked. My voice sounded like I'd been swallowing sand. The officer adjusted his belt, his flashlight beam dancing across my dashboard. "You look like you've seen a ghost, son. What's going on? You reported an attempted breach." I hesitated. I looked at his badge, then at the reassuringly heavy 9 on his hip. Suddenly, trying to explain the physics of what I'd seen felt insane. How do you tell a man who deals in facts and evidence that you've been stalked by a man who can outrun a Peterbilt? How do you tell him about the smile? "There were people out here," I said finally, my voice steadier now. "Multiple. They were all over the truck, banging on the trailer, climbing the sides, scratching at the glass. They were trying to get in, officer." "I'm not crazy, I heard them on the roof." The officer didn't roll his eyes, he didn't scoff. He just exchanged a long, unreadable glance with his partner near the front grille. It wasn't a look of disbelief, it was something heavier, it was recognition. "Stay put," he said, his tone dropping an octave. "We're gonna take a look around, keep your doors locked until I come back." I watched them go. Their flashlights were like twin sabers slicing through the gloom. I followed the light as they circled the trailer. I saw them stop near the rear doors, leaning down to inspect the mud flaps. Then one of them, the younger officer, stepped up onto the fuel tank and shined his light across the top of the sleeper cab. I saw his shoulders stiffen. He stayed up there for a long time, the beam of his light fixed on something I couldn't see. "Hey," he called out to his partner, his voice tight. "Miller, you're gonna want to see this." Miller hiked over, climbing up the steps to join him. They stood there, two silhouettes against the dark sky, looking down at the roof of my truck. My stomach didn't just drop, it evaporated. I knew what they were looking at. I'd heard the weight of it. When Miller finally climbed back down and walked to my window, he didn't speak right away. He took off his hat, wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead despite the cold, and just stared at me. "You said there were multiple people?" he asked quietly. Yeah, I answered, my heart starting to pick up its frantic rhythm again. At least 3, maybe 4. I saw faces at the window, man, different faces. He nodded slowly, biting his lip. Then he leaned in a little closer, the smell of his coffee and peppermint gum momentarily blocking out the smell of the woods. We've got a problem with that, driver. We only see one set of footprints. I blinked, the words not quite registering. What do you mean, one? I heard them everywhere. It sounded like a damn riot outside this cab. He pointed his flashlight toward the soft, muddy shoulder of the lot. Ground soft enough from the rain to hold a clear impression. We've got one trail, one person. He came up from the road, not from the woods, but from the highway itself. He circled your truck twice, and then he climbed it. No, I said, the panic rising in my throat. That's not right. I heard voices. I heard a man speak to me right outside this door. I saw a face on the passenger side. The younger officer who'd walked back over leaned against the doorframe. You sure it wasn't echoes, sir? These valley roads. Sound carries weird at night. Wind hits the trailer, creates a vacuum, makes things sound like they're right in your ear. I shook my head violently. I wasn't going to let them logic me out of my own terror. I know what I saw, I know what I heard. They didn't argue. They just looked at each other again. That look, that local look, where they knew something they weren't allowed to put in an official report. Look, Miller said, lowering his voice, truth is, we've had a couple of reports out here before. Not exactly like yours, but close enough to keep us busy. I leaned toward the window, desperate for an answer. What kind of reports? Miller hesitated, his eyes wandering toward the dark line of trees. People seeing someone on the road late at night. Always on this stretch of the 219. Walking, standing, same general description you gave, dark jacket, jeans, no gear. Drivers call it in thinking it's a hitchhiker or a jumper. And I pushed, and nothing, he said, his voice flat. We respond, we sweep the road. No one's ever there. No tracks, no abandoned cars, nothing. In 6 years no one else ever actually caught him, and no one else ever actually had him interact with them like you did. The weight of that word, interact, felt like a physical blow. What about the roof? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You said there were prints? Yeah, Miller replied, and I saw a shiver run through him that he couldn't hide. Boot prints, size 10, maybe 11, heavily treaded. They came up from the rear ladder, walked across the top of the trailer, and stopped right above the driver's seat, right above your head. I looked up at the ceiling of the cab, at the thin layer of plastic and insulation that had been the only thing between me and that thing. Then what? I asked. Where do the prints go? He shook his head, looking genuinely unsettled. That's the thing. They just stop. They're right there, pressed deep into the grime on the roof, pointed right at the windshield. But there's no exit trail, no slide marks on the side, no jump prints in the dirt around the truck. It's like he stood over you. And then he just wasn't there anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the crickets were chirping. The two officers stood there, their presence no longer feeling like a shield, but more like witnesses to a funeral. So what are you saying? I asked. What am I supposed to do? Miller adjusted his belt and looked back at his cruiser. Look, we can stick around for a few more minutes, but we've got a domestic call 3 towns over and a multi-car pileup on the interstate. We can't stay all night. If you're able to move, if you're physically okay to drive, it might not be a bad idea to get back on the road. Get to a lighted station, get to the county line. You want me to leave? I asked, incredulous. You want me to go back out there on that road? I'm saying you're safer moving than sitting still in the dark, Miller said firmly. Whatever this is, it seems to like a stationary target. You stay in the light, you stay in the fast lane, and you don't stop until you see the sun. You understand me? I nodded. I didn't have a choice. Sitting here was a death sentence. Moving was a gamble. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, the deep, guttural vibration of the diesel feeling more like a growl of defiance than a mechanical process. The officers stepped back, giving me a somber wave as I checked my air brakes. PSHHH. The sound of the air release felt like a final warning. I pulled out of that rest stop slowly, my eyes darting to every mirror. The officers stayed in the lot, their headlights pointed toward the woods as I pulled onto the main road. I watched them in my rearview mirror, two small points of light in a vast sea of black. And then, just as I was about to round the first bend, I saw it. At the very edge of the tree line, just outside the reach of the police flashlights, a figure was standing. It was tall, too tall. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching my tail lights fade. I blinked, and the shadow of a tree seemed to swallow it whole. Just your imagination, I told myself. The cops are right there, you're fine. I pushed the truck hard. I didn't care about the fuel economy. I didn't care about the wear on the tires. I just wanted miles. I wanted distance. I watched the odometer click, 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles. The road was a ribbon of grey surrounded by a wall of green. No other cars, no houses. Just me and the hum of the engine. But then, about 15 minutes later, that feeling came back. It started as a tingle at the base of my spine. Then it moved up to the back of my neck, making the small hairs stand on end. It was that same oppressive, heavy sensation of being watched. Not from the side of the road, but from somewhere else. I checked the mirrors, nothing. I checked the passenger seat, still empty save for that rusted road sign I'd found earlier, "See you tomorrow." I reached over and shoved the sign onto the floorboard, covering it with a rag. I didn't want to look at it. I focused on the road ahead. My high beams were cutting through a light patch of ground fog when I saw him. Up ahead, maybe a quarter mile. A figure walking, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I didn't slow down. I gripped the wheel until my hands went numb. As the distance closed, the details became clearer. The dark jacket, the jeans, the slow, rhythmic pace. As the truck bore down on him, doing 70 miles per hour, he did it again. He didn't jump into the woods. He didn't cower. He slowly turned his head, his neck moving with a sickening, fluid grace. The headlights hit his face. His skin looked like wet parchment stretched over a skull. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting nothing. And the smile was bigger now. It wasn't just a grin. It was a cavernous opening that seemed to defy the structure of a human jaw. As I screamed past him, I felt the truck rock. Not from the wind. It was a heavy metallic thud, the sound of something heavy impacting the side of the trailer. Clack shhh, clack shhh, the sound of dragging footsteps on the roof. I didn't look up. I didn't look in the mirror. I just stared at the road ahead, tears of pure, unadulterated terror blurring my vision. "Hey," the voice didn't come from the window this time. It didn't come from outside the cab. It came from the sleeper berth, right behind my head, soft, wet. "I told you. I'd see you tomorrow." I didn't look back. I just closed my eyes and prayed for the sun. Outro music, the sound of a truck engine fading into a high-pitched, distorted screech. Narrator, some roads aren't meant to be traveled, and some passengers. They don't need an invitation. Keep your eyes on the road, and whatever you do, don't look behind the curtain. This has been Tales of the Dark. Stay safe, if you can. This was it. The moment my reality didn't just crack, it shattered into a million jagged pieces. I had just left a crime scene. I had 2 state troopers, men with badges and guns and radio frequencies, standing not 5 miles behind me in a lit parking lot. They had searched the perimeter. They had seen the impossible tracks on my roof, and yet here he was. The high beams of the Peterbilt cut through the Pennsylvania mist, and there, standing on the gravel shoulder like a statue carved from shadow, was the man. Same dark jacket, heavy with the phantom scent of damp earth. Same slow, rhythmic gait that shouldn't have been able to keep pace with a bicycle, let alone a semi-truck doing 70. He turned his head. That smile, God, that smile, it wasn't the expression of a human being. It was the way a tectonic plate looks when it's about to shift, fixed, ancient, and utterly indifferent to the destruction it's about to cause. He wasn't tired, he wasn't breathing hard, he was just there, not stopping. I hissed, my voice cracking like dry parchment. "Not this time. Not ever. You aren't real. You're a flicker in the light. You're sleep deprivation. You're nothing." I jammed my work boot down on the accelerator. The turbocharger whined, a high-pitched scream that mirrored the one trapped in my throat. The needle climbed, 80, 85. The trailer behind me began to fishtail slightly, a 40-ton pendulum of steel, but I didn't care. I was going to blow past him so fast the vacuum would pull the air right out of his lungs. But as the chrome grille of my truck aimed for his shoulder, he didn't flinch. He didn't dive for the ditch. He stepped, one smooth, deliberate stride directly into the center of my lane. Jesus, my survival instinct overrode my terror. I slammed the air brakes. The sound was deafening, a screech of rubber against asphalt that sounded like the earth itself was being torn open. The steering wheel bucked in my hands, trying to throw the rig into a roll, but I fought it, smelling the acrid blue smoke of burning tires filling the cab. The truck shuddered to a violent, bone-jarring halt. I sat there, gasping, the smell of burnt rubber choking me. My headlights were flooded with him. He was standing mere feet from the bumper, dead center in the blinding white glare. He didn't blink. The light should have seared his retinas, but he just stood there, bathed in that artificial sun, wearing that same jagged grin. "Move," I whispered, my forehead resting against the cool glass of the windshield. "Please, just move." Nothing. The woods around us seemed to lean in, dampening the sound of the idling engine. "Get out of the road," I roared, slamming my fist against the horn. The blast echoed off the hills, a lonely, desperate sound. He didn't even flinch at the noise. Instead, he took one slow step forward, then another. He closed the gap until the hood of the truck blocked my view of his waist. He was right against the metal. Then he raised his hand. It wasn't a gesture of greeting, it was slow, clinical. He pressed his palm flat against the chrome grille, right over the emblem. The moment his skin touched the metal, the world died. The engine didn't sputter, it didn't stall, it simply ceased to exist. 1 second I felt the massive vibration of 16 liters of diesel power. The next, it was like the engine had been erased from reality. The headlights flickered, the bright white light dimming to a sickly, jaundiced yellow. The dashboard lights went dark. What the hell? I twisted the key, silence. I tried again, grinding the starter until my fingers hurt. Nothing. The truck was a dead hunk of iron in the middle of nowhere. And then he leaned forward. His face rose up over the hood, pressing toward the windshield. Up close, the man was a nightmare of texture. His skin didn't have pores, it looked like grey, weathered wood. His eyes weren't pits of darkness, they were flat like unpolished stones. For the first time, the smile faded, not because he was angry, but because the mask was slipping. What was left was an emptiness so profound it made my soul feel cold. "You didn't listen," he said. His voice didn't come through the glass, it didn't travel through the air. It vibrated directly into the marrow of my bones. It was soft, like the sound of a shovel hitting a stone. My throat was a desert I couldn't even swallow. I don't know what you want. You were supposed to stop the first time," he whispered. "What first time?" I managed to choke out. "I've been driving all night, I haven't stopped for anyone." He tilted his head. The movement was bird-like, sharp, jerky. He looked confused, like a predator wondering why its prey was making such strange noises. "Before you remember," he said. A chill raced through me that made the Pennsylvania winter feel like a tropical breeze. "What does that mean?" "I remember everything. I remember the construction, the reroute, You passed us," he interrupted. His hand was still pressed to the grill, and I could swear I saw the metal beginning to frost over where he touched it. Before the road bent, before the sign, my mind began to spiral, clawing back through the hours. The road bend. There had been one miles back near an old stone bridge, and the sign, rest area 2 miles. I remembered the sign, but I didn't remember anyone on the shoulder. I didn't remember. Then a flash of a memory hit me. A memory that hadn't been there a second ago. A dark shape. A man standing by a broken down car. No, not a car. A wreck. A smoldering, twisted wreck that looked exactly like my own truck. "You looked right at me," he said, his face inches from the glass. I could see my own reflection in his flat stone eyes. I looked terrified. He looked like eternity. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. I'm right here. I'm driving." "You just didn't stop," he said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the cab. He stared at me for what felt like an hour, staring into the very center of my being. Then the corners of his mouth began to twitch. The smile returned, wider, sharper, revealing teeth that looked like jagged shards of bone. Slowly, with agonizing deliberation, he lifted his hand off the grill. The moment the contact broke, the truck screamed back to life. The engine roared at a high RPM, the headlights snapped back to a blinding brilliance, and the heater kicked on, blowing a gale of hot air into my face. The electronics were back. The world was loud again, but he was still there, standing in the center of the beam. Smiling, I didn't think, I didn't check my mirrors, I didn't pray. I slammed the shifter into gear and floored it. The truck lurched forward with a groan of tortured metal. For a split second, his face was right there, inches from the glass, and I braced for the impact, for the sound of bones snapping against steel. But at the last possible microsecond, he stepped aside. One smooth, liquid movement. He didn't run, he just let the 40-ton beast roar past him. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes locked on the white line, my foot buried so deep into the floorboard that my leg began to cramp. I drove like a man possessed, weaving through the curves of the 219, pushing the rig far past its safety limits. I was almost to the county line. I could see the glow of a 24-hour truck stop in the distance, the beautiful neon glow of civilization. I started to laugh, a high hysterical sound that hurt my lungs. I made it, I sobbed. I'm out of the woods. But then I made the mistake that every driver makes when they think they're safe. I glanced at the side mirror. He wasn't on the road. The highway behind me was empty, a long stretch of black asphalt disappearing into the trees, but my blood ran cold anyway. Because there, on the polished aluminium side of my sleeper cab, right where he had stood, was a handprint. It wasn't made of mud. It wasn't made of grease. It was a deep physical indentation in the metal, as if the steel had softened like wax under his touch. Long, spindly fingers were etched into the side of my truck, and right below it, scratched into the paint with something dark and thick that was already starting to dry. You stop next time. I didn't stop at the truck stop. I didn't stop at the county line. I didn't stop until I saw the sun rise over the Ohio border. And when I finally got out to look at my truck in the cold, honest light of morning, the handprint was gone. The scratches were gone. The metal was smooth, the paint was perfect. But when I climbed back into the cab to finish my haul, I looked down at the floorboard. There, sitting on top of the rag I'd used to cover the old road sign, was a single heavy boot print, size 11, deeply treaded, and it was still wet. Narrator: every trucker has a story about the one that got away. But sometimes it's not about getting away. Sometimes it's just about being let go. For now, the road is long and the nights are even longer. Keep your doors locked, and for God's sake, if you see a man in a dark jacket, don't look him in the eye. This has been Tales of the Dark. We'll be waiting for you on the next stretch of road, Gemini said. The laughter that had been bubbling in my chest moments ago died a grisly death. It didn't just stop, it curdled. The neon open sign of the gas station, which had felt like a lighthouse in a storm, now felt like a spotlight on a stage where I was the only actor left who didn't know the script. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. My boots were lead, my heart was a pneumatic drill slamming against my ribs, and my vision began to tunnel until all I could see was that hypnotic white line on the asphalt. The message on the side of the sleeper, that dark, oily smear, wasn't just a threat. It was a brand. It hadn't been carved into the metal with a knife. It looked like it had been wept onto the aluminium. It was thick, glistening under the amber marker lights, smelling faintly of old copper and stagnant marsh water. Keep driving, I hissed, the words whistling through my clenched teeth. Just keep driving. 5 more miles to the border, 5 more miles to the lights. The road ahead was a void, no oncoming high beams, no red taillights in the distance. Just the rhythmic thump-thump of the tires over the expansion joints and the heavy mechanical breathing of the engine. For 15 minutes the world was almost normal. The woods stayed in their place. The shoulder remained empty. My breathing started to shallow out, and for a second, just a fraction of a second, I let myself believe the nightmare had stayed behind in the mist of the 219. Then the radio died. I hadn't even turned the damn thing on. The head unit was a dark slab of plastic, but suddenly the speakers erupted with a burst of static so sharp it felt like a physical slap to the face. I flinched, the truck swerving an inch toward the rumble strip. The digital display didn't show a station frequency. It showed zeros, 0. Then, through the white noise, came the voice. It wasn't coming through the speakers so much as it was leaking out of them. "You passed us." My blood didn't just run cold, it froze in my veins, sharp as glass. It was the same dry leaf rasp, the same impossible calm inflection. I slammed my hand against the power knob, twisting it until it clicked. The static cut out. Silence reclaimed the cab, but it was a jagged, ugly silence. I stared at the radio, my hand trembling. Then the display flickered back to life. Next time, shut up, shut the hell up. I screamed, slamming my fist into the console. The plastic cracked under the blow and the radio finally went dark, but the words stayed. They weren't just sounds anymore, they were hitchhikers in my skull. "Before you remember." I drove another 2 miles, my eyes darting between the road and the dark corners of the cab. And then, like a miracle, I saw it, a gas station. It was a small, independent place, 2 pumps and a cinder block shack, but it was bathed in the harsh, beautiful glow of fluorescent lights. There was life there, there was reality. I pulled in so fast the air brakes hissed like a dying animal. I didn't even shut off the engine. I just grabbed my phone, leaped out of the cab, and ran for the door. The air hit me like a bucket of ice water, but I welcomed the sting. I needed to feel something that wasn't dread. Inside, the store smelled of floor wax and stale hot dogs. A teenager with greasy hair and a name tag that read Caleb looked up from a magazine. He took one look at me and straightened up, his eyes widening. "You all right, man? You look like you just crawled out of a wreck." "I'm being followed," I panted, leaning against the counter. My sweat was cold and I could feel my pulse thudding in my fingertips. Back on the road, the rest stopped. There were people. They were trying to get into my rig. Caleb frowned, glancing over my shoulder at the dark parking lot. "Out here we don't get much trouble. Maybe some kids from the high school looking for a scare." No, this wasn't kids. I shook my head, my voice rising. "I need to call the cops, again. I need to stay here until the sun comes up." "Phone's right there," he said, pointing to the landline. "Help yourself, you want some water or something?" I nodded, trying to slow my breathing. I reached for the phone, but my eyes drifted to the glass front door. In the pitch black of the night, the glass acted like a perfect mirror, reflecting the brightly lit interior of the store. I saw Caleb, I saw the racks of chips. I saw myself pale and wild-eyed, and I saw the truck. Standing directly behind my trailer, perfectly framed in the reflection, was a figure. He was standing in the middle of the empty lot, bathed in the overhead fluorescent light. He wasn't hiding, he was just waiting. My heart didn't just race, it tried to escape my chest. I spun around, my boots squeaking on the linoleum, and stared through the actual glass at the actual parking lot. Empty. There was nothing there but my truck idling loudly and the cracked pavement. No man, no jacket. No shadow. I turned back to the reflection. He was still there. He took a slow, agonizing step toward the truck. He tilted his head to the side, a bird-like movement that made my stomach heave. And then, even from across the lot, even through the distorted reflection, I saw the teeth. He was smiling at me through the mirror world. "Hey," I whispered, my voice failing me. "Hey kid, do you see him, in the glass?" Caleb walked over, squinting through the window. "See who? The lot's empty, man, just your rig. In the reflection, look at the reflection." Caleb looked at the glass, then back at me, his expression shifting from concern to genuine fear. "I don't see anything, mister, just the pumps." He didn't see him, because he wasn't there for Caleb. The figure in the reflection moved again. He reached out a long, grey hand and pressed it against the back of my trailer. In the real world, the truck rocked on its suspension, a heavy thud echoing through the lot. "I'm leaving," I choked out. "Wait, the cops. I have to go," I bolted. I didn't care about the phone or the water or the safety of the store. If he could reach me through a reflection, there was nowhere to hide. I scrambled into the cab, the diesel engine's roar sounding like a funeral dirge. I locked the doors, my fingers fumbling with the switches. Click, click, click. I slammed the truck into gear and tore out of that lot, the tires screaming. I didn't look at Caleb, I didn't look at the store, I just focused on the darkness ahead. For a mile, I felt a strange, hollow sense of relief. I was moving again. The lights of the gas station were fading in the distance. I was alone in the cab. I was safe, but then I felt it. The air in the cab changed. It didn't get colder, it got heavier. The smell of damp earth and old copper filled the small space, thick enough to taste. I looked at the rearview mirror, not the side mirrors. The small, rectangular mirror mounted on the windshield that looked back into the sleeper berth. He wasn't on the road. He was sitting on the edge of my bed. He was leaning forward, his long, grey fingers resting on the back of my seat. His face was inches from the headrest, caught in the dim green glow of the dashboard lights. The smile was gone. His mouth was open, a dark, bottomless pit of a grin. "I told you," he whispered, his breath smelling of the grave. "You should have stopped the first time." I didn't scream, I couldn't. I just watched in the mirror as he reached out a hand toward my shoulder. "Welcome back to Tales of the Dark," he whispered. Outro music, a slow, distorted mechanical grinding that fades into a heartbeat. Narrator: sometimes the road doesn't lead home. Sometimes it just leads further into the night. If you're driving late and you feel a chill, don't check the mirror. Some passengers don't wait for a ride. Stay in the light, if you still can. This has been Tales of the Dark. Good night, and goodbye. The dashboard lights began to pulse. Not a flicker, but a slow, rhythmic throb, like a dying heart struggling to push blood through cold veins. I froze. My hands were locked on the steering wheel so tight the plastic groaned under the pressure. My foot was buried in the floorboard, but the pedal felt like it was pressing against a wall of solid concrete. I knew with a certainty that defied every year I'd spent on the road that I was alone in this cab. I'd locked the doors. I'd checked the sleeper. There was no one in this truck except me, and yet in the rearview mirror he was there. He was sitting directly behind me on the edge of the bunk, perfectly still, his silhouette framed by the shifting shadows of the cabin. He was smiling. It wasn't a smile of joy or even malice. It was the smile of a trap finally snapping shut. My chest tightened so hard it felt like my ribs were caving in. I couldn't draw a full breath. "No," I whispered, my voice a ragged sliver of sound. "No, no, no." I slowly turned my head, just a fraction, just enough to glance over my shoulder into the dark void of the sleeper berth. The seat was empty. The blankets were undisturbed. There was nothing there but the faint smell of stale coffee and diesel. I snapped my eyes back to the mirror. He was still there. Same position, same horrific, fixed grin. It was like the mirror was a window into a different dimension, showing me something that wasn't physically in the truck, or maybe something that didn't need to be physical to be real. I slammed my foot on the gas, desperation overriding my terror. The truck shot forward, the tires screeching and smoking as I tore back onto the highway. I didn't care about the speed limit. I didn't care about the way stations or the state troopers or the safety of the cargo. I didn't care about anything except distance. The faster I moved, the further I could get from that reflection. But no matter how fast the needle climbed, every time I looked at that mirror, he was still there, not moving, not blinking, just watching the back of my head with those flat, dead eyes. "You're not real," I said out loud. I needed to hear my own voice to ground myself. "You're not real. You're a hallucination. You're exhaustion. You're the road playing tricks." For the first time he moved. Slowly, very slowly, he leaned forward. He didn't stand up. He just elongated his torso, closing the gap between the sleeper and the driver's seat. He drifted closer until his face was just inches behind my headrest. I could see every nightmare detail now. His eyes, they weren't just wide. They were lidless, rimmed with a raw red soreness. His skin pale, almost grey, looking like wet ash under the dim green glow of the cab lights. And that smile, it was wider than anything a human face should be able to hold. It looked like his jaw had been unhinged and stitched back together by someone who didn't understand how faces worked. "You see us now," he whispered. I flinched so hard the truck swerved, the trailer tires catching the gravel shoulder with a violent thrum thud. I fought the wheel back, my heart hammering against my teeth. His voice, it wasn't coming from the radio or the speakers anymore. It was inside the truck. It was warm against the back of my neck. "I don't want to see you," I shouted, the sound cracking in the small space. "You already did. My breathing became erratic, fast, shallow. I felt like I was drowning in the very air I was breathing. I didn't stop. I yelled at the windshield. I kept driving. I did what you said. I didn't stop at the wreck. There was a pause, a heavy, suffocating silence that tasted like copper, then a quiet, almost amused response. That's why we followed. My stomach dropped into a cold, dark pit. We don't follow everyone, he continued. His voice was a dry rasp like sandpaper on bone. Only the ones who pass. Pass, that word again, it felt like a verdict. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely holding together, sounding like a child's plea. What do you want from me? Another pause, then you were given a chance. My grip tightened on the wheel until my knuckles turned white. A chance for what? This time he didn't answer right away. Instead, I felt it. A presence, not just behind me anymore, around me. The air in the cab grew thick and pressurized, like I was deep underwater. The walls of the truck seemed to pulse inward, the entire space growing smaller, tighter, more intimate. You were supposed to stop, he said softly, almost sadly. And then another voice joined in. It came from the passenger side, clear as a bell. We were waiting. My head snapped to the right. The passenger seat was empty. The door was locked, but the voice had been right there, vibrating in the seat cushion next to me. Then another voice, this one muffled, coming from somewhere deep behind the dashboard. You saw us. And another from the roof vent directly above my head. You kept going. My entire body went cold. The sweat on my forehead felt like ice water, because now I understood. It wasn't just him, it never was. The walker, the man at the rest stop, the face in the reflection, they were just pieces of a larger whole. It was all of them, and they were everywhere. They were in the vents, in the engine, in the very grain of the seat covers. You don't get to leave, the first voice whispered again, his breath ghosting over my ear. I shook my head violently, hot tears of rage and terror stinging my eyes. Yes, I do. I'm crossing the line, I'm getting out of this county. I pressed harder on the gas, I stood on it. The speedometer needle swept past 70, 80, 90. The engine was screaming, a high-pitched metallic howl that shook the floorboards. The road ahead was a blur of grey and black, the trees becoming a solid, dark wall on either side. I didn't care if I crashed, I just needed to be moving. But then the truck started to slow down, despite my foot still burying the pedal into the floor. Despite the engine roaring, the momentum began to bleed away as if the air itself had turned into molasses. No, I said, the panic rising like bile in my throat. No, 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 the engine strained, the RPMs redlining, but the speed dropped. 80, 70. What are you doing to my truck? I shouted at the empty air, no response, but I could feel it. Something was fundamentally wrong, not with the road, not with the mechanical parts of the Peterbilt. It was the control. The wheel felt heavy, unresponsive. The brakes began to hiss on their own, the air pressure dropping on the gauges. You don't choose when to stop, the voice said calmly, almost mockingly. My hands tightened on the wheel, my fingers aching. I'm not stopping, I'm not yet. The truck slowed further. 60, 50, 40. The heavy rig was being reined in like a panicked horse by an invisible rider. I tried everything. I shifted gears, I pumped the brakes, I pulled the emergency release. Nothing worked. The machine had betrayed me. You stop when we say, another voice whispered from the floorboards. My heart felt like it was going to explode in my chest. My vision began to flicker, black spots dancing at the edges of the headlights' reach. And then up ahead I saw something. It wasn't a wreck this time. It wasn't a single walker. Figures, standing in the middle of the road, side by side, a solid wall of shadows stretching from shoulder to shoulder. They weren't waving, they weren't asking for help. They were just standing there, their dark jackets fluttering in the wind of my approach. My breathing stopped. The air brakes locked up completely, the truck skidding to a slow, agonizing halt just feet away from the line of figures. Because I knew this time they weren't going to step aside. And the man in my mirror, he wasn't behind me anymore. He was reaching for the door handle. Outro music. The sound of a heavy door latch clicking open, followed by a long, slow creak. Narrator, some halls never reach their destination. Some roads lead to places that aren't on any map. If you're driving tonight and the road feels a little too empty, Maybe it's because everyone else knew when to stop, stay in the light, while the light still exists. This has been Tales of the Dark. We'll see you at the next stop. Good night.